Hello, everybody. I just wanted to go over some basic information with you guys on the outline. The first thing I want to tell you guys is again, please read the instructions. You can see here instructions, it tells you step one and step two. Now, some of you did put your specific purpose in the posting. That was fine. I gave you credit for it. But it tells you how to do this, how to list it, okay? It says right there, label your topic, general purpose to inform, specific purpose, and central idea as step one. Step two was to have all these parts of the body, okay, of the outline. I gave you guys an example here with a video. Some of you did not look at this. Again, I'm posting this information to help you guys. If you don't look at it, then I'm sorry, don't complain about your grade later, okay? Some of you didn't even put it in an outline. I told you all it's not supposed to be word for word of what you're going to say, it's just general ideas. Some of you turned in the entire speech. That was not the assignment. So, again, please make sure that you guys are following the instructions. The specific purpose is supposed to be one clear and specific topic in the sentence. There should be no and in this sentence. Okay? There should be no and. If you have an and in this, that means you have two topics. It should be one clear, specific sentence that tells us exactly what your speech is about. Now, I found this slide in one of the presenters that we get from the publisher, and it's talking about topical order and how you can organize a speech. Here it talks about Josephine Baker and her life as an entertainer, as a spy, and then as a civil rights activist. So, if I was going to be doing a speech, an informative speech, I need to write my specific purpose to inform my audience on the life of Josephine Baker. It is very clear, it is precise. And this is all your specific purposes. It's telling us what this speech is about. To inform my audience on the different roles Josephine, I cannot type. Good job, Simon. Baker has had over her lifetime. That's still specific, but there should be no and. To inform my audience on the life and death of Josephine Baker. This is two separate topics, okay? There should be no and. You should not do this. To inform my audience on the life of Josephine Baker and what she did to help humanity. No, that's two separate topics. Again, there's an and in it. It should be one clear statement. Some of you guys have several topics. You talk about why you should do this and the importance of it. So don't put an. Reword the sentence to where there is no and. The importance of doing this. So, for example, some of you, I want to bring it up to inform my audience on why they should vote and why it is important. It has an and in it. This is two separate topics. So combine it and make it into one clear, specific sentence. To inform my audience on the importance of voting. It's still pretty much the same thing, but now there is no and. There's no two separate things. It is just one clear, quick, and specific statement. So please look over your outline again. If you have an and in it, reword it to where it is one clear and specific statement, okay? The central ideas are three. Unless you have more main points, it should only be three. So the central ideas for my example is her role as an entertainer, as a spy, and civil rights activist. That's my three central ideas. This is now going to be also my three main points. So whatever your three main points are, that is what your central idea is. Okay? You get it from the body. Maybe you do this at the end when you do this. Maybe if you have more than four or five, but then only three main points, you have too many. You've done it incorrectly. Okay? On your main points, it should only be one clear statement. Okay? So in main point, it should be one clear thing. So for her, of course, I'm going to put entertainer here. I do not put entertainer and spy. That's two separate topics. So just do one and that's it. Spy. And then civil rights activist. All right? And his, there should be no and. Entertainer and singer. Spy and I right away want to think snitch, but that's not right. Spy and whatever, okay? It should be one clear topic. If you have an and in this area too, you need to change it, okay? So do not put entertainer and importance. Put the importance or the role of entertainer. The importance of it being an entertainer, okay? So remember, that's what your central ideas are. They're going to be the three main points, or if you have more, if you have four, then you need to add the fourth one in here. Okay? So, my central idea would be that to inform my audience on the life of Josephine Baker, her life as an entertainer, as a spy during World War II, and finally as a civil rights activist. You can make this into one sentence, you can make this into two sentences. But right here is the statement you should have for your central ideas. Some of you forgot to even do that. You just put the informative, the specific purpose, and that was it. Please make sure you are following the instructions, okay? So this is what your body should be. Again, remember, you do not have to be as specific. But this is the body of a speech right here. You need to have an introduction. In your introduction, you must have an attention grabber. An attention grabber is anything that grabs the attention of your audience. You can use a famous quote from somebody. You can use a hypothetical situation. You can use a joke. Again, though, remember, if you are not a funny person, maybe you shouldn't use jokes. There's nothing sadder than seeing somebody try to tell a joke and it go horribly wrong. You can do hypothetical question. You can ask a real question, anything like that. One of you guys did this during your introduction. They asked a question and then they pretended to count the audience members. That is fine. But just remember, if you ask a question, you need to pause to give your audience time to think and to try to give some answer. Do not ask the question and then keep on talking. So if my introduction was a question, if I said, have any of you ever heard of Josephine Baker? My speech today will be covering the life of hers. No, I need to pause and give the audience time to think about my question. Have any of you ever heard of Josephine Baker? Maybe count to three in your head. Give the audience time. You'll be looking at the audience. So if you see hands going up, you wait longer. So you do this as you use the question. Have any of you ever heard of Josephine Baker? So I'm here today to tell you about the life of Josephine Baker. My speech today will cover her life as an entertainer, as a spy, and finally as a civil rights activist. This is where I preview my main points. So I do not just grab the attention of my audience. I need to preview what my speech is going to be about. So again, have any of you ever heard of Josephine Baker? No one has. Good. Well, today I'm going to tell you about the fascinating life of Josephine Baker. Today I will discuss her role as an entertainer. I will discuss her role as a spy during World War II. And finally, I will cover her role as a civil rights activist. Right there is my introduction. I used an attention grabber. I asked a simple question. I previewed my main points. That's it. Now I need to move on to my main points. This is what's called transitioning. When you transition from point to point, use what is called a signpost. So if you heard my preview, I use signposts, numbers, sequences. Have any of you heard of Josephine Baker? No, that's great because today I'm going to tell you about the fascinating life of Josephine Baker. First, I will discuss her role as an entertainer. Second, I will discuss her role as a spy during World War II. And finally, I will discuss her role as a civil rights activist. Did you hear I said first I will discuss, second I will discuss, and finally? That's what a signpost is. That's transitioning. I'm letting the audience know my first main point is going to cover her life as an entertainer. My second main point is going to cover her life as a spy. And then finally, that tells people finally it's the last one, is going to be her role as a civil rights activist. That's what all I do in my introduction. Okay? So now I transition to the body. Now that I have finished my preview, I simply use a signpost to let my audience know. I can pause. I can say, okay, moving on to my first main point. Josephine Baker was an entertainer. She captivated audience in Europe and America. Give all the supporting evidence of this. Blah, 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 blah. I want to move to my second main point. I need to transition. I use my signpost. Now that I have finished discussing her life as an entertainer, I'm going to move on to my second main point of her life as a spy during World War II. Josephine Baker during World War II gathered information on Nazi activities in France during World War II. Blah, 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 give supporting evidence, give everything that I want to talk about in this section. You hear how I transition? Now that I've finished my first main point, let's move on to my next main point. That signpost, I'm letting the audience know, okay, I'm done talking about being an entertainer. Now I'm moving on to my second main point. I want to transition to main point 3. I do the same thing. Now that I have finished discussing her life as a spy during World War II, let's move on to my third and final main point. Her role as a civil rights activist. Josephine Baker worked for racial equality on a variety of fronts. First, she worked on blah, 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 give all the supporting information that I want to give during this point. So you heard, I said now that I'm done as a spy, let's move on. So then I get to my conclusion. Remember, in your conclusion, you recap your main points. So I just say, I recap. If I was going to type this out and submit it, I just put recap, entertainer, spy, and civil rights. Or just simply write, recap my main points. You did not have to list it out word for word, but at least write it here. It should be the first part of your conclusion. So, signpost, transitioning from main point 3 to conclusion. Now that I've finished talking about my final main point, her role as a civil activist, let's move on to the ending of my speech. I'm letting people know I'm at the end of my speech. I can also say, now that I've finished discussing the third main point, let's move on to the conclusion of my speech. Or I can simply pause and say, in conclusion, in my speech today, I talked to you about the life of Josephine Baker. I covered her role as an entertainer, as a spy during World War II, and finally as a civil rights activist. I just recapped the 3 things that I have discussed in my speech. I transitioned from main point 3 to my conclusion by using my signpost saying, in conclusion. That's the audience. Boom. They're at the conclusion part. Again, you don't have to say it exactly like that. In conclusion, you can say, now to conclude my speech. Now to finish, or now to wrap up this speech on Josephine Baker's life. Today I discussed with you the following three main points of her life, or whatever. You can word it that way. And then the last part is do not just say, okay, that's it. Okay, I'm done. You end with a bang. If you can at all, tie it back to the attention grabber. So, my attention grabber was a simple question. How many of you have heard of Josephine Baker? That was the question. That was what I started my speech out with. So, I can tie that back. So, in conclusion, in my speech today, I talked to you about the life of Josephine Baker. I talked to you about her life as an entertainer. I talked to you about her life as a spy during World War II. And I finished up with her role as a civil rights activist. Now, the next time somebody asks you a question about who is Josephine Baker, you have the information you need to answer that question. Or you can say, next time somebody asks who is Josephine Baker, you can answer that question. I didn't have to give a big speech, but I tied it to my introduction. I know it's kind of lame, but that's what I thought of on the spot, okay? So if you ask the question in your introduction, maybe now you give the answer. If you asked a hypothetical question, maybe you give a hypothetical answer. If you start with a quote, you can end with a quote. Since I'm doing the life of Josephine Baker, maybe I can use a quote. You know, In conclusion, today I talked to you about the life of Josephine Baker. I discussed her role as an entertainer. I discussed her role as a spy during World War II. And I discussed her role as a civil rights activist. There's no better way to end this speech than by giving you a quote by Josephine Baker. Mic drop. Boom. I don't know, whatever. Just give a quote of what she said. That's how you can do it. So you can start it any way you want. It does not have to tie back to the conclusion, but it does finish the loop. It does finish, that little cycle that you started. So it could be a good idea to do that. But make sure next time on your outlines that you list them. Like I said, you do not have to put it word for word. Just use attention grabber. And then, ask a question. That's all you got to put on this. Preview main points. That's all you have to write. And then put entertainer, what it is. And then, of course, here you have an A and a B, just like how you have here. So put all the information you're going to list. The last thing I want to discuss with you guys is the time. Okay? Let's say this speech was supposed to be 5 minutes total. What I want to aim at as a speaker when I'm practicing is the 4.5. This is my goal. I want to do, when I'm rehearsing my speech, when I'm practicing it, I want to hit the midpoint of this. When you guys do your real speech, maybe you get nervous and talk faster. Or maybe you talk slower. You do not want to go over your time limit, so you want to have that 30 seconds to play with. Okay? So always aim for the middle. If this was if the instructions say 5 to 7 minutes, then aim for the midpoint, 6. So that way if you talk too fast, you don't go over 7. If you talk too fast, you don't go under 5. If you talk too slow, you don't go over 7. Okay? Make sure you are aiming for the midpoint. So if it's a 5-minute speech, that means all of this that I'm doing needs to be broken down. Your conclusion should never be more than 10% of the time. So if this is a 5-minute speech, your introduction should be 30 seconds. Your conclusion should only be 30 seconds. Your introduction should never be longer than the body. Okay? Your introduction and your conclusion are just to grab the attention and preview. The body of the speech comes here in the main points. So we have 1 minute right here used up. We have 4 minutes left. So that means this needs to be a minute 20. This means this needs to be a minute 20. And this needs to be a minute 20. There is my 5 minute speech. Okay? You should never have an introduction that takes longer than 3 minutes, and then main point one is 5 seconds, and then main point two is 1 minute. This is how your speech should be divided. If Now, of course, if it goes over, I'm not going to count off. If this is 35 seconds, this is a minute 15, a minute 25, that's fine. But if this is just 20 seconds, my first main point is blah, 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 moving on to my second main point, and then 3 minutes later, moving on to my third main point, it's very noticeable. You need to break this down. You need to give each topic the respect it deserves. Now, if you have a main point that's only 20 seconds and the rest, maybe that's not a good main point. Maybe you should eliminate and find a new one. If you have one that's a minute 20, and then this one's 5 minutes, maybe you need to break it into another main point. Maybe you need to split it. Okay? But this is what a 5 minute one should look like. It's just the rule of five. So if you have a 10 minute, then all you do is double. 1 minute your introduction, 1 minute your conclusion. All of these in here should be about 2 minutes long. So just remember that, the rule of five. Every time it gets longer, just double it, okay? But remember, you should not have a main point that doesn't last, okay? Now for your transitioning, just like I said, you can pause. Pause can be transitioning. So if I'm talking, as her life as an entertainer, she captivated audiences. She performed in Europe. She performed in America. Josephine Baker's role as a spy during World War II was another role in her life. Blah, blah, blah. And then pause. The last role that I would like to talk to you guys about today is her role as a civil rights activist. So you do not even have to give the numbers. You do not have to say the first, the second, the last. You can use pauses as well. Okay? Some of you guys did great. You did list your transitioning. Others of you forgot to do that. So remember, transitioning is a very big part of your speech. You need to let your audience where you are in your speech. You literally, it's just like when you write a paper. When you write a paper, you start a new paragraph because you changed the topic. The same thing with a speech. You use signposts to start the new paragraph, the new topic, okay? So it's kind of similar to that, so think of it that way, okay? All right, this is all the information I have for you guys. I hope this video helps you. And if you have any questions at all, please let me know, okay? Thank you.